So it's actually considered a derogatory term in the African American community. And so Sambo grew up feeling ashamed of his name here in the United States. Well, gentrification, he was displaced from his home. I felt called to write this. Sambo remembers the smell of lab, or larb, as Americans like to call it, minced chicken stir-fried in mother's kitchen with a fresh squeeze of lime, mint leaves, and bird's eye chili plucked straight from the garden grown from his father's green thumb in front of their one-bedroom home. The complex is shared with at least 10 other units, most full of other Cambodian families, with herbs aligned down the narrow plot of soil to remind them of the roots they were displaced from. The pearl of Southeast Asia, Angkor Wat temples and rice paddy fields where the poor always had enough to eat, where fruit trees and vegetables did not hide behind white picket fences and manicured lawns, but bloomed freely across territories without 40-foot wired fences or landmines as borders. Sambo never knew the details, never was taught his own culture, but could sing, "God bless America," and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, hand over heart, bearing the same stars and stripes that dropped bombs over his mother's land 40 years ago. But teachers called him Uncle Sam for short, afraid to speak the name Sambo for the chains it carried in their colonized diction of Black slaves mixed with indigenous blood, lynchings and mobs and white hoodies, a history brutal enough to be left out of his American textbooks. But it was in the garden, Father reaching for the branch of his banana tree where he spoke in his first tongue, like a secret being passed down on the verge of extinction, and learned the ancestral truth behind his Sanskrit name, Sambo, one of great riches, abundance, like the persimmons and guavas thriving in the front yard, enough to feed a small village. And so it was, until the neighbors turned to hipsters, until the taco stands turned to coffee shops, until the landlord came and covered the soil with cement, raising the rent by 10% and forbidding any sunlight to break through. Gardening was more than just organic, more than just a trend reserved for those with access to stolen land and wages. To plant seeds was to resist the temptation of the dollar menu, from the golden arches beaming at every other corner, or the liquor store that numbed the pain and drowned the voices in his mind. Sambo wants to break through the concrete, to reach for the stars and nourish the soil from which he was planted from, to return the smell of his mother's cooking and the smile of his father's face, to take away the diabetes, respiratory, and cardiovascular disease rooted in trauma, stress, depression, poverty, and racism buried deep underneath a pile of medical bills where only the symptoms can be seen. To garden is to heal without prescription. To plant is to take back what once was ours before it was placed into pretty plastic packages and sold back to us for a profit. This country wants us to forget, but he will grow to bear fruit that will produce the seeds of resistance needed to keep his culture alive. And we are all seeds trapped in a shell, eagerly waiting to sprout. And soon our mother will quake to shake us into existence. The clouds will rumble with our anger upon truth, and rain will drop tears to cleanse our pain, to remind us this was always ours. And now is the time to reclaim.